In the aftermath of the First Tiberium War, the Global Defense Initiative became the most powerful organization on Earth, generating great wealth for itself and having influence on many other countries and organizations. Over the next several years, GDI would use much of this wealth and influence to fund various scientific and, more importantly, military research and development projects. Some of these projects included advancements in spacecraft, harmonic resonance, also known as sonic technology, mechanized walkers, and hover technology. I've already done a video on sonics, and for this video, I'll be focusing on hover technology, or hovertech as it's called. As to exactly when GDI started researching and developing this kind of technology after the First War, my guess is around the year 2024. This is based off the intelligence database from Command & Conquer 3 Kane's Wrath, referencing the entry about the Slingshot hover vehicle. It says that this particular vehicle was, quote, finally out of testing after a decade-long development phase. The first sighting of this vehicle in the campaign occurred in the year 2034, when the Brotherhood of Nod tried to retrieve some of their stolen technology in Australia. So a decade, being 10 years, would put the start of the development of the Slingshot at the year 2024. However, this doesn't mean that the other hover vehicles, like the MLRS or Shatterer tanks, also started development at this time. And just because that mission is the first time we see the Slingshot, also does not mean it's the first deployment of the vehicle either. But I don't think that the year 2024 has to necessarily apply to that one specific vehicle. I think instead it could act as a general starting point for GDI's hover technology in a more broad sense. As to why GDI would be interested in hover tech specifically, I would think it's because having a vehicle that hovers would have some advantages. A few being the fact that it could float across various terrain surfaces and not have to worry about getting stuck in places such as mud compared to tractor walker vehicles. It can move faster compared to said other vehicles, and most importantly, it could float across water, allowing the vehicle to cross rivers or lakes. Tractor walker vehicles would need either a bridge to do so, or be airlifted to the other side. Hover tech didn't just have to apply to vehicles though. It could have also been the tech used in drones such as the Limpet and Hunter Seekers. But for this video, I'll just be focusing on the vehicles. And by vehicles, I mean ones that hover a few meters off the ground, so no aircraft such as the Orca or Venom. I'll also be saving naval-related units for a separate topic as well. Hover vehicles also have many disadvantages. If it gets hit by a hostile tank round, it's probably going to go spinning out of control. Just having a tank-sized gun on the hovercraft would add recoil, which the vehicle may not be able to handle unless it had extra thrusters to counteract it. Which brings up the fact that the vehicle would need powerful engines, such as turbofans on a jet, just to keep the thing hovering a few meters off the ground. GDI was able to work out much of these issues, which led to the deployment of their first hover vehicle during the events of the Second Tiberium War, that being the Hover Multi-Launch Rocket System, or MLRS for short. During the First Tiberium War, GDI used the M270 MLRS as their primary artillery platform on the front lines against the Brotherhood of Nod. For their first hover vehicle, they decided to take the rocket system used on that vehicle and fit it onto a hover chassis, thereby creating the Hover MLRS. This vehicle maintained a low profile thanks to the flatbed-designed main body. The 6 engines that provided the lift for it were located on the bottom near the sides. On the top part of the vehicle, near the front, was the driver's seat. Only one crewman was needed to operate the vehicle. Behind where the driver sits is the actual rocket launcher system. This system was mounted on a turret that allowed it limited rotation in both azimuth and elevation. It could carry a total of 16 guided rockets, all of which could be fired while the vehicle was on the move. There is also what looks to be a couple of openings on top of the sides of the vehicle's main body. 2 more of these openings can also be seen on the very front of it. I'm not sure what these would be used for, but if I had to take a guess, they could absorb extra air when the vehicle is moving forward and expel it below the body for extra lift. The Hover MLRS made use of all the aforementioned advantages of a hover vehicle. It could move across any terrain, which was especially useful for getting across fields of weeds that were grown by a veinhole monster, which would destroy heavier ground vehicles.
Unit lost.
It could also cross bodies of water such as rivers or lakes. This became integral in allowing Michael McNeil and his forces to recapture Hammerfest base from the Brotherhood of Nod in Norway. The vehicle was also quite versatile in its targeting, as it could fire upon both ground forces and aircraft. In fact, it was really the only reliable mobile anti-aircraft vehicle in GDI's arsenal during the Second Tiberium War. It could also fire its rockets over walls and hills, thereby negating the high ground advantage by Brotherhood forces. One of the weaknesses of this vehicle was its light armor, making it more of a support unit and not a frontline main battle tank, or in this case, Walker, like the Titan Mark I. Another major weakness was that the vehicle's hover capabilities could be shut down during an ion storm. This would render the vehicle into nothing but a defensive turret, at least until the storm passed. If the vehicle was over a deep body of water during such a storm, however, it would no doubt become a watery grave for the driver inside. These, along with other issues, would see the Hover MLRS retired from GDI service shortly after the Second War and the resulting Firestorm crisis. However, the hover tech that the organization had developed would be put to use in other vehicles. As mentioned in the prologue of this video, the Slingshot was another one of GDI's hover vehicles that was in development before the Second Tiberium War. The vehicle wasn't ready for frontline combat during the war though, and with the military funding cuts afterward, it was questionable whether or not it would ever be seen on the battlefield. Thankfully for the scientists and engineers that worked on it, it would be. This may have been due to a commander named Joshua Mitch Mitchell arguing against such major military funding cuts. In the aftermath of a long and volatile hearing, GDI agreed to a portion of its R&D funding to be allocated to one experimental combat division. This division ended up becoming the Steel Talons, and the first sighting of the Slingshot, at least according to the events of Kane's Wrath, was with this division. With GDI's shuttering of its costly, failure-prone hover-tech initiative in the aftermath of the Second Tiberium War, the GDI Slingshot was somewhat of an anomaly, the last bastion of this once dominant GDI program, finally out of testing after a decade-long development phase. While this exclusively anti-air vehicle is less vulnerable to ion storm interference than its predecessors, the Slingshot remains a relatively fragile unit, trading armor and additional weaponry for high speed, maneuverability, and a powerful quad cannon that can quickly bring down even the most powerful aerial opponent, crashing to the ground. The Slingshot was such a powerful anti-air vehicle that it quickly became available to all GDI divisions. The vehicle seems to have a crew of two, one driver in the main body of the vehicle, and another in the turret operating the cannons. While not the most well-armored vehicle, it can move quickly across the battlefield. The quad cannon is able to target any aircraft, whether they be Nod or Skrin, using its own radar guidance system. The vehicle could also make use of tungsten shells, allowing it to more quickly down said enemy aircraft. Though it could not target ground units with its cannons, the vehicle could use its high speed to run over any enemy infantry that get too close to it. The Slingshot wasn't the only hover-derived vehicle to survive the funding cuts. Another one, called the Shatterer, also found itself in service. However, this vehicle was not intended to fulfill a military role, rather instead being used for the purposes of Tiberium abatement, according to the intelligence database. As with its non-mobile brethren, the Sonic Emitter defensive turret, the GDI Shatterer was originally designed with Tiberium abatement in mind, using a modified version of the aforementioned turret to propel concentrated waves of sonic energy deep into Tiberium fields, operating safely from a hover-tech-derived mobile platform. However, with Nod's devastating attack on Washington, D.C., GDI High Command ordered that the vehicle be redesigned as a combat vehicle. With the Sonic Emitter's bulk leaving little room for armor, the slow-moving Shatterer is somewhat of a sitting duck. However, when deployed in unison with GDI's other, more flexible armored elements, the Shatterer is a force to be reckoned with. Unlike the Slingshot, the Shatterer was slow-moving and only had a crew of one, which was due to the large sonic weapon mounted on top of the vehicle. It also couldn't fire and move at the same time. It was effective at taking out Nod base structures, or clearing garrisoned buildings. The sonic wave it fired could even pass through multiple units, causing damage in a line. Of course, Zocom had their own special variant of the Shatterer, which was called the Zone Shatterer. This variant functioned the same as the original, with the exception that it had the ability to, quote, overload beam, and launch an extra powerful sonic blast at a target. This was primarily used to break up large Tiberium crystals in red zones, but was also effective at destroying some Nod units in a single blast. The downside to such an ability, though, was that it would render the Zone Shatterer completely disabled for a few seconds, making it vulnerable to attack. While GDI may have thought themselves to be the only ones with advanced hover tech, the invasion of the Skrin during the Third Tiberium War brought that notion to an end, as the alien species had its own vehicles that it made use of on the battlefield. It's unknown exactly what kind of technology the Skrin employed to allow their tanks to hover, but it's certainly not the same as that used by GDI. It could be some sort of anti-gravity tech, but that's just pure speculation on my part. The first of these Skrin hover vehicles was called the Seeker tank. This is a very versatile unit, acting as a scout, main battle tank, and mobile anti-aircraft platform. Armor-wise, it wasn't as strong as the GDI Predator tanks, but it could be fielded in large numbers. Its main weapon was a disc launcher which could propel plasma-derived discs at both ground and air targets, even while on the move. The tank was also capable of detecting enemy stealth units. In order to make up for its lack of armor, the Skrin could upgrade their Seekers with attenuated force fields. These shields would absorb some direct damage before collapsing, allowing the Seekers to stay alive on the battlefield a little longer. The shield could also absorb an EMP blast as well, preventing the tank from being shut down by such an attack. Not only could the Seeker's defensive capabilities be improved, but so too could its offensive ones. This came in the form of shard launchers, which replaced the standard disc launcher on the vehicle. This new launcher would fire shards of Tiberium crystals at targets, which were more effective at causing damage. The Skrin had an even more powerful hover tank in their arsenal, that being the Devourer. The Devourer acted as a heavy tank, able to more effectively destroy non-GDI vehicles such as the Scorpion or Predator compared to the Seeker tank. Its main weapon would fire a beam of energy well outside the range of fire of hostile MBTs, and even outside the range of some base defenses. The tank had a special built-in conversion beam, which allowed it to break down Tiberium crystals and absorb them inside of it, thereby boosting the firepower of its main weapon. This can be observed in a change in beam color, as a boosted energy beam will be green, and a non-boosted one will be blue. The tank would eventually run out of Tiberium, and would have to absorb more in order to reboost its weapon. Those Devourer tanks that were part of the Reaper 17's arsenal could be upgraded with conversion reserves, which would allow them to absorb and hold even more Tiberium, enabling their beams to fire more boosted shots before running out. The Devourer did have weaknesses that could be exploited though, such as its slow movement speed, susceptibility to flanking attacks, and being vulnerable to aircraft, which made it important for Skrin to provide their Devourers with nearby supporting units. Perhaps the most important hover vehicle in the Skrin arsenal was not even meant for combat. I'm referring, of course, to the Harvester. This unit would float over Tiberium fields, using its tentacles to help find mature crystals. Once it found a cluster, it would break the crystals down at the molecular level, absorbing them into its mouth. When full, the Harvester would then deposit said Tiberium at an extractor. Harvesters that were part of the Reaper 17 sect had a personal shield, which would increase their chances of surviving attacks from hostile human forces. The last vehicle in the Skrin arsenal to make use of their own hover technology was the Explorer. Completely unarmed and unarmored, this vehicle's sole purpose was to seek out new fields of Tiberium and plant itself next to them, thereby allowing the Skrin to begin construction of extractors and other structures in order to expand their harvesting operations on the battlefield. While hover tech may not have been the end-all be-all of GDI's military advancements, it still saw use on the battlefield, from the humble hover MLRS of the Second Tiberium War to the slingshots and shatterers of the Third War. With the invasion of the Skrin, GDI quickly noticed that they were no longer the only ones to use such technology in their arsenal, as seen by the aliens' Seeker and Devourer tanks. With the first invasion defeated, this could give GDI the opportunity to learn more about the technology that the Skrin used in their hover vehicles, perhaps allowing GDI to revisit and even improve upon their own hover-derived platforms in the future.